my name is Olivia Haley, and I'm currently a senior at the University of Florida. I'm happy to introduce Paula Scanlan. Paula is a swimmer, influencer, and defender of free speech. Paula is a graduate of University of Pennsylvania, where she swam on their women's swim team. During her time with UPenn women's swim team, Paula had struggles competing alongside her biologically male teammate, Lia Thomas, and with the college's administration and student body trying to silence her and suppress her right to free speech about the matter. Inspired by fellow female athletes who shared similar experiences, Paula broke her silence in July 2023. Paula Scanlan is a legislative liaison at the Independent Women's Forum and the Independent Women's Voice. She officially partnered with IW in July 2023 to advance our joint mission of defending women's single-sex spaces and standing up for the right to free speech. Paula has encouraged females, especially athletes, to come forward, share their stories, and join her in making changes to protect women everywhere. Please join me in welcoming Paula Scanlan.
Hi, everyone. It is so great to be here. I love speaking for CBL because I get to talk to all women, which doesn't happen a lot at these conferences because I seem to see a lot of men. So when I get to see a group full of women, it is amazing, especially since my message in particular is very catered towards women and females and talking about empowering us. So I get to say some things that I wouldn't say otherwise in front of the men. So thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate it. My mom is here in the back. I just have to shout her out really quickly. So yeah, it's not every day that I have family that gets to come because I'm traveling all around the world. I took my 96th flight last night to get here of the year. So I'm definitely all over the place. So I'm really grateful for that. I'm really grateful to be here. And I'm really just beyond just excited to just see a group full of women that are like-minded, willing to listen, and willing to go be active and be active members of society. But with that, I'm just going to share to you guys briefly about my story, how I got to where I am right now, talking to you, giving a speech in front of women on a Saturday in the middle of November, but also giving you a message and giving you tools to potentially have you speak out about things that you see in your life because not to put us down, but us women, we do struggle with that a little bit more. And I think that it's something that we're working on, that we're changing, and I've actually seen so many powerful women come into place, especially on the issues I work on. So I want to encourage you guys, and that's really, really the point of why I'm here. So obviously it's the end of a pretty big week. I'm just going to leave it at that, and there's not the point of the conversation that we're having today. But I went to the University of Pennsylvania where I was a swimmer, and I had worked my entire life to swim in the Division I level. I was giving up countless hours every single week. I was giving up holidays. I remember on December 26th, I would have to fly to training trips, and I would miss time out with my family. But it was all worth it because I got to eventually go swim in college, which was my goal. My freshman year at college, it was as normal as you could expect. I was, doing my major, swimming, going to practices. But that all changed when I was a sophomore. I was 19 years old. At the very beginning of the season, we had a team meeting. And in this team meeting, the men's team actually went first, and us women were told to wait. And it was really interesting because we had the same coach, and there was never anything that the men needed to know that we didn't need to know also. So I was wondering while the men were in this meeting, what could possibly be happening that would make us be separate? Anyway, the men finish, they all go to their locker room, get ready for practice, and none of them talk to us. And we go to start this meeting, and there was, interestingly, a member of the men's team that was waiting back. And you could probably guess, but his name was Lia Thomas. And I was wondering why he was still there. And I said, this is a women's team meeting. Why is a member of the men's team still hanging back? And our coach goes to start the meeting, and he just says, guys, I'm turning it over to Will. Will, this is your meeting. And in this, in under 30 seconds, he told us, I am transgender. I am transitioning to your team next season. Please refer to me now with she, her pronouns. There was no further conversation. There was no Q&A. Our coach said, okay, great, everyone get in the pool. Practice starts in 5 minutes. And in this moment, I was shocked. I honestly, if I'm being honest, I was holding back laughter because I thought there was no way that this was real. There was no way that anyone in their right mind could possibly think that a man who's 6'4" tall, by the way, belongs on a women's swim team. But of course, the cameras didn't come out and tell me it was a prank show. I noticed none of my other teammates were really laughing. Everyone was saying, congratulations, we're so proud of you. This is amazing. This is history. This is outstanding. And I said, this seems like a practical joke. And I was in shock. And so at this point, that night, I go and I look up, I say, okay, maybe he thinks he can do this, but surely there's some rules somewhere that says that he can't. But to my surprise, I go on the NCAA website and I find this thing called the Transgender Inclusion Handbook, which was written in the early 2010s. I think it was maybe 2010, 2012, something like that it was written. And in it, it says that if a man wants to transition onto a women's swim team, it just takes 1 year of testosterone suppressant, and he's good to go to compete on any women's sports team in the country. Whether it's D1, D2, D3, whether it's swimming, track, gymnastics, you name it, every sport. And it's actually funny because I was going through my phone the other day, and I actually found a screenshot from September of 2019 where I screenshotted this site that I found. I must have been sending it to someone. I don't even know who it was for. But it was crazy how far this issue's come, because back then it was, this handbook that's just somewhere on the internet, and now we're seeing the influx of, there's almost 1,000 female athletes that have lost out on medals from males competing in women's sports. And the UN is the group that admitted that. By the way, this is not some far-right conspiracy that they like to push. The UN admitted that they did a study. They found at least almost 1,000 female athletes have lost out on medals because a male competed in their sport. And that's just not just the Olympic level. That's not just the high school level. That's not just the college level. It's just across. They've found that. And again, the UN is not known for getting involved in this issue and for being on our side on most things. So that was really interesting. And again, back then in this time, it didn't seem like it was something that was very common. And again, it wasn't very common. There was my team was really one of the first situations this happened on. And so in this, I said, okay, fine. These might be the rules. These might be the policies that allow this. They might think that, yes, a man can compete on a women's swim team, but surely someone will have common sense and say that this isn't going to happen. And I remember when I was telling this situation to my friends who weren't on the swim team with me, they would say, Paula, you sound crazy. There's no way the University of Pennsylvania and the NCAA and all these other things are going to allow this to happen. Somebody will step up and do the right thing. This isn't going to become a reality in a year. You're just making a big deal over nothing. It's all going to get resolved overnight. But of course, nobody stepped up and did the right thing, and we had a year of COVID delay our season, and it's now the fall of 2021, and I'm now a senior. Thomas took a gap year, and in the fall of 2021, he was on our team like anyone else. He was a member of the women's team. He had a locker in our locker room. He had a nameplate in there. He had a spot on our team. He was on the roster online. It was all there. And there was no further conversation about it. It was just, this person is on your team, and you must treat him like any other woman on the team. And again, as time went on, I wasn't sure actually how fast he would swim. Again, we had a year off for COVID. It was really unclear what would happen. Of course, I knew if he even competed to even a fraction of his ability, he would win an NCAA championship, which, he obviously ended up doing, spoiler alert, but I'm sure you guys all already know that. And that was obviously the worst case scenario, was for him to win something outright. But even if he hadn't, it still wouldn't have been fair, because what a lot of people don't realize is, yes, while he did rob Olympians of their NCAA championship titles, what happened on our team is swimming is a limited roster sport. So every single time Thomas competed on behalf of the University of Pennsylvania, someone was asked to stay home. And that is not even allowing a woman to compete at all. Whether or not she ends up going in and adding time or placing last or whatever it might be, she's denied the opportunity to compete the next level altogether. And that's something a lot of people don't talk about, because while of course it's very obvious on the podium stand when we see these men win, women are also being denied the opportunity to compete. So if this male athlete even places last, there was one more girl who was denied the opportunity to be in the competition altogether. And that's what this is about, because it's not about winning, it's about having equal opportunity. And that is why this issue is so problematic, because again, if I didn't win an NCAA championship, but I was still discriminated against, and a lot of people don't have that conversation. So that's, again, really why this issue is so important to speak about and improve on. And so as the season went on, a lot of people didn't really know what was going on. I was trying to wait and see for someone to get a hold of the story. And by the midway point of the season, he had already beaten all the records in every event that he swam. He had already been posting top times in the country. And eventually, finally, somebody got a hold of the story. And there was this reporter that had written a story that he'd figured out the fact that this athlete who was dropping top times in the country had competed on the men's team for 3 years prior. And in this, I decided I was going to reach out to him and say, hey, there's actually a lot more going on here. The university had been silencing us at this point. The university had been forcing us to undress with him in the locker room 18 times every single week at this point. And there was a lot of parts of the story that you wouldn't know from just finding out online that this athlete is actually male. I reach out to this reporter and I say, hey, would you be willing to take some quotes on this? And that ended up turning into a crazy anonymous article that had been published, and many of my teammates actually found out I did it, and multiple girls on my team went to my coach and said I was disgusting. They asked that I get kicked off the team, and they told the coach that they didn't feel comfortable rooming with me at competitions and training trip and all of that because they felt that I was a horrible person. And I find that really interesting because there were girls who were complaining about undressing with Thomas in the locker room, but there were more girls who were willing to room with him at meets than room with me. But they're still simultaneously complaining about losing their opportunities behind closed doors and having to undress with him in the locker room. So again, it's a little bit of a double standard, and this is really why I want to talk to you guys as women about this issue. Is because as women, we want to be kind. We want to be caring. We want to be perceived as nice. We don't want people to not like us. And of course, there's always going to be people that are unhappy with your opinion. And of course, there's always going to be people that are uncomfortable with what you have to say. And that was what was hardest for me as a woman going through this. And so as time went on, the university came in, they sat us down, and they gave us this formal meeting. And in the meeting, they told us, if we ever spoke out against it, we would regret it. They told us we'd be labeled as bigots and hateful for the rest of our lives. They said you'd never be able to find a job because your job will search you up and see what you've said about this issue, and you will be on the wrong side of history if you speak out. They compared it to the next civil rights movement. They said if you don't want to undress with a fully grown man in a locker room, that's somehow equivalent to not wanting to undress with someone based on their race. And in this meeting, the last thing that they told us was they said, if you still object to all of the things we've said to you, please seek help. Here's the number for psychological services. Make an appointment. And it was after this meeting that you couldn't have conversations anymore with your teammates. I had one teammate that I had a conversation with before, and she told me she thought it was incredibly unfair. She said, I want this to be put to an end. I don't want to see him compete on our team. I don't want to watch him go to these championships. I don't want to see this continue to happen. But after this meeting, she was telling everyone that, oh, Paula's a horrible person for her opinions. We need to be inclusive. We need to be caring. And so what I experienced on my team and what I saw and what disappointed me more than the unfairness was the way that the women were willing, on my team, were willing to change their opinions because they felt like it was the popular thing to do. And again, this is not to diss anyone in this room. You guys are all amazing people, but we have to stop doing this as women. And something else I've been thinking a lot about lately is, in the past week, actually, coming up to the election, I've received messages from a lot of people in my life from college, from middle school, from high school, you name it, that have congratulated me on speaking out on this issue and have said, I really fully support you. You know what they all have in common? Every single one of them was a man. I've had a very limited number of females in my life reach out to me in support of this issue. While I have had some, I'm not going to discount the ones that have. It's very uncommon. And so I asked myself why. And again, and this is not to diss us because I love being a woman. I would never not want to be a woman, and I'm sure everyone in this room feels the same way. But for us to get ahead of this issue and get ahead of other issues, we have to move past this. We have to find a way to speak out when it's uncomfortable. We have to find a way to talk about these issues when we're being put down without feeling like we're going to lose our friends or lose our jobs or lose our opportunities. And so, again, as the season went on, the most disappointing thing to me was the number of girls on my team that I saw that disagreed with me privately. And then after these meetings came in and they had silenced all of us, they weren't willing to have the conversations. And behind my back, they would go and say, oh, don't you think it's so horrible what Paula is saying? Don't you think it's so disturbing that she's so transphobic and against men? When in reality, they go home to their room at night, they call their mom, and they say, Mom, this is so unfair. They're not willing to say these things publicly. And again, this is because nobody wants to be painted as hateful. None of us do. And the reality is about this issue and about every issue that you guys might face going forward is there's always going to be people that have something to say about you. But you have to ask yourself what you know to be true. You have to rely on your own values. You have to rely on yourself to say, this isn't right. This isn't fair. This issue is wrong. And what I'm experiencing is the wrong thing. And that was really why I changed my opinion on this. And so after this started to happen, I said, okay, maybe all my teammates are right and we should stop talking about this. So the season went on, and I stopped doing anonymous interviews. I said, okay, maybe I really am the problem, and all my teammates have it right, and we should just be quiet about this. I tried to do small things. Eventually, I was talked into doing the What is a Woman documentary, which I did anonymously. And that was really scary. I was really I just didn't think it was the right thing to do. I wasn't sure. I didn't want to be labeled as hateful. I really stopped talking about it. I stopped publicizing my opinions to people because I said again, the right thing to do is to sit down and be quiet. The right thing as a woman to do is to be caring. And the caring thing to do is to allow Thomas to continue to compete and take trophies because it's not my place to tell him that he's wrong. I did buy into that a little bit, like the rest of my teammates, like the rest of the women on other sports teams. Something I will share quickly is actually I went to high school with the men's team manager at Harvard University. And I asked him, I said, what do the men on the Harvard swim team think and what do the women think? And he said, the men think this is completely ridiculous. But the girls at Harvard, he said that they said, as long as Lia is happy, that they are supportive. And I thought about this why, and I later found out the girls at Harvard were actually sent in writing that if they did not support Thomas competing on the women's swim team at Penn, and they ever spoke out against it, they would contribute to someone committing suicide. That is the most emotional manipulation that they did. And honestly, I don't blame any girl in the situation who didn't speak up. I really don't. Because they know that works on women. Nobody wants to be responsible for somebody taking their own life. That is completely crazy. But you're not responsible if that happens. And we're training girls to say, if you are somehow involved in speaking the truth, you're the problem. You have the issues. And it works. And that's what's so scary about this is these universities, the NCAA, they knew exactly what would work to make us women be quiet about this. And even for myself, it was really hard to see through. And so as time went on, I said, okay, you know what? I can't rock the boat. I can't be a crazy person. I can't have people hate me. I can't lose my job. I convinced myself of all the things they wanted me to know and they wanted me to believe. And I went on and I said, okay, yeah, that was a bad season. Thomas won an NCAA championship. They censored our team. I lost a lot of friends on my team for speaking about it publicly amongst my teammates. And I went on and I said, I'm going to go on with my life and I'm never going to think about this again. And also, I probably don't think many men are going to be competing in women's sports. But of course, it was only the beginning of this issue. And I watched this explode across the country. And I watched younger girls deal with this. And I saw things that actually happened that were far worse than what I experienced. I heard the case of in Loudoun County, Virginia, there was a girl who was assaulted in a bathroom by a male who said he was a woman and went in there. And I said, okay, that's really not good, but what can I possibly do about this personally? And I kept hearing stories, and it was, maybe there's a high school athlete competing, and it's, maybe, it's just happening every now and again. But there was one story I heard that really changed my perspective on this issue and made me realize I couldn't stay quiet any longer. I had been working my job that they told me I was going to lose if I ever spoke out publicly. I was doing exactly what my university wanted me to do, sit down and be quiet and move on. And I was sitting at my desk and I was sent this article and this video of this female athlete in high school. Her name's Peyton McNabb, and I'm sure many of you are probably familiar with her name and her story. She was knocked unconscious by a volleyball that was hit by a male athlete on the opposing team. And it partially paralyzed her. She was not able to play sports for the rest of her life. She's in college now and can't play sports. She has permanent injuries from getting hit so hard. And I realized in this situation that there was far more to lose because this is life-altering. This is dangerous. This is unsafe. And this is not just, some people telling me that you're hateful for speaking out against males competing in women's sports. This is not people calling you names. There are girls who are being permanently injured by this issue. And I sat down and I felt this immediate feeling of guilt. And I was, why do I feel guilty? It's not like I put the male on the team. And I asked myself I tried to get to the bottom of this guilt. And in the moment, I wasn't sure really why I was feeling. My urge was to cry. I mean, I'm tearing up reading this article, watching this video. And again, I couldn't really wrap my mind around it. And in this, I realized that if I continued to stay silent on this issue, that I was part of the problem. And I can't say that realization came to a lot of other people that I know that went through this, because there have been a limited number of athletes that have spoken out on this issue. I mean, none of my teammates at the University of Pennsylvania have ever publicly spoken out against this. And it was interesting because I was like, why am I feeling this way? This isn't my fault. I shouldn't feel like that. But it really came down to one thing. Do you want to be part of the problem of something, or do you want to be part of the solution? And I've always been the type of person who's always been very proactive in things and wanting to get involved and wanting to just do my best to problem solve. And I actually found out through talking to a lot of people that that's actually not common. Men are more likely to have that type of personality trait, and they shouldn't. We shouldn't allow the men to be the only ones who are doing that. We shouldn't allow the men to be the loudest voices in the room. We shouldn't allow the men to make change on things that are wrong, and us just saying, oh, well, it's okay. I don't want to make anyone upset. And so it was interesting because when I spoke out about this issue, I was told, oh, like, you're kind of acting more masculine, but why? We as women have capabilities, and this doesn't discount anything that we're able to do. Of course, I encourage every single one of you in this room to go out and start a family and be a mother, because that is what God made us to do. And of course, we should do those things, but it doesn't mean that we can't be active. It doesn't mean that we can't partake in making change and speaking our minds and speaking up when we see something wrong that's happening. And again, I felt very, very conflicted about this. And I said, well, it's not really my place, or, more men are in power, let them handle the situation. Well, in this particular issue, the head of the NCAA president is a man. He doesn't know what he's doing. He still thinks men can play women's sports. So why should we let him make the rules for us? And that's really when I started to realize. And I still feel like I want more women to be vocal. I want to hear more women's opinions. But we've come a long way. I do want this to be a positive thing. I'm not trying to put anyone in this room down, or any woman that is in my life down. My mom's here, obviously. I can't. But I have been hopeful on this issue, because what I've seen in this is I know it's actually the women that have made the change on this. Because again, we have male athletes that have spoken out against this. We have high-profile male athletes that have spoken out against this. But the policy changes, the actual teams that have been able to get males off their teams, it all came from the women that stood up and did something. And again, the reason this happens is because if we're not willing to do it ourselves, how can we expect anyone else to? And so as time went on, I eventually realized I had to speak out against this, and I did publicly. And the word of encouragement for it, and I said, what difference am I going to make? Well, I said, well, it doesn't matter if I don't even really go and pass legislative changes, or I get the NCAA to change their policy. I hope that they do. They still haven't. But I noticed in this is that we started to encourage more female athletes to speak out. And obviously Riley Gaines is a really close friend of mine, and she has been encouraging women across the board to speak up on this issue, but we've normalized it. We've been able to make this issue say this is a women's issue and women are allowed to talk about it. And so in my short journey of talking about this for only publicly for a year and a half, we saw the Roanoke women's swim team. So they had the same situation as me. They're a college swim team in the D3, and they had a male athlete try to join their team. And all the girls said, well, Paula and Riley and others have spoken about this, so why can't I? And the entire team stood together, and they said, no, enough is enough, and the male athlete was asked to leave their team. Just recently now in volleyball and college volleyball, we've seen San Jose State, and I'm sure you guys are also probably very familiar with that. It's a very active, ongoing story. But these teams are saying, I don't want to play a male athlete on the opposing team, and they're forfeiting the games. Again, they're doing so collectively. And there is something to be said about strength in numbers, but you have to start somewhere. So again, by being the first people to speak up on this issue, we've started to encourage entire teams to speak out in a way that certainly didn't happen during the season that Riley and I were competing in, because entire teams weren't ready to do that. And so my point of this message is not to say, oh, women are always quiet and it's all our fault and all this horrible stuff's happening. No. My point of this message is, and again, I hope that not a single one of you in this room experiences having to compete against a man or has a man in your bathroom or in your locker room. And of course, if you do, you speak out about it, you send me a message, and I will make sure it never happens again. But My point of this is to say, don't be afraid to be the person in the room who's doing something different. Because while it's not common for women to do it, we're able to make the most change when we speak out. And that is something that, again, there is, in this space that I work in, it's very male-dominated. So when you're a woman who's saying what we say, what I talk about, people actually do listen. Because it says, oh, wait a minute, the women are willing to complain about this publicly? Something must be really wrong here. And so I tell you all this to encourage you to speak out when you see things, to not be afraid of what people might say about you or tell you that you're hateful or bigoted or whatever name calling they might say, because they will do it. And it is unpleasant, and I'm not going to lie to you. There's times when I read my comments or messages that I receive, and it makes me upset. But the reason it makes me upset is because I'm a human. And these things will get to you. And it's not to say, oh, everything is wonderful and all these people have nothing to say. It does hurt you. But it's more important to speak what you know to be true. And I have honestly felt that I am so much happier telling the truth on this issue than feeling guilty and sitting at the desk job that they told me I would never have if I ever spoke out. Because for me personally, the guilt of knowing that I experienced something wrong and I wasn't willing to speak out against it, that is far greater than anything that they could call me, any name that they can yell at me, anything difficult that I could talk about or say. I mean, it doesn't mean anything if you're not willing to speak up and speak the truth. And so as women, I love being a woman, I really do. And I think that this issue really comes down to, in society, like they've put down men for so long. And really some of the more left-leaning ideas that have been really crazy have really made men go crazy and think that they need to become women to be happy, which is insane to me. I mean, I can't believe we actually talk about this issue. I can't believe there's even a conversation to be had about men trying to be women. I mean, I think it's just, I don't really even have words to defend the insanity of it. But what I do know is this issue comes from people not willing to speak up. And that is true of a lot of things that happen in this country. And it is up to all of us because so many people think to themselves, I'm just one person, I can't make a change. But it's not about that. It's about who you empower along the way. If you speak up, you might encourage one more person to do it with you, and they'll encourage another, and they'll encourage another. So quite literally, no voice is too small. There is nothing... I find that it's so valuable to speak up and be part of something. And again, I know there's so many people who feel like, oh, well, I might lose these things and I might lose some friends. And the advice, because you guys are all young, the advice I give you is I have lost a lot of friends in my journey of speaking out against this. But what I do know is those were never my friends to begin with. Because if there's someone in your life that can't respect you for speaking the truth and speaking your feelings and your emotions and what you're going through, then that's not someone that deserves to be in your life. And that's not someone who was your friend to begin with. And so I really appreciate being in a room with like-minded women like yourself, like all of you here. It is so great. And so with this, I really encourage you to always speak out when you see something wrong, to not be afraid to be the one person that says something, because again, you don't know who you might empower. You don't know who you might help through, and there really is strength in numbers, but somebody has to be first. And so do not be afraid to be the person who speaks the truth and speaks first, because again, you don't know what great things you can contribute to, and it really is up to us to do it. And women are so capable and so amazing, and just this room speaks to that. And so with that, we're gonna do a few questions in a moment, but I really am beyond grateful for you guys being here and listening. I just again, there's so many women in this world who I feel like are so quiet. And I know that every single one of you in this room will not be silent when you experience something wrong. And that gives me hope. So go forward in your life and join every industry that you want to, and make sure that we don't have madness like men and women's sports any longer. So thank you all so much.
Okay, so again, please come stand here, say your name, where you're from, and your school. So, yeah. Okay, you have to come over.
Okay. My name's Kristen, and I'm a recent graduate from Wright State University. But my question is, what does it take or what will it take for the NCAA to actually make a change? Like, what can we do to support you, to support people who are speaking out? Like, what will it take?
I think that the boycotts that we've seen lately has been really big for the NCAA because obviously if no one's competing at all, that is a huge hit. So I would say keep encouraging female athletes to boycott if they're competing against men. I mean, it's really hard. These teams that have done it, that's really amazing because it involves the entire team being on the same page, or the majority of them. And so that's something to keep encouraging. We've tried with letters. We've tried to harass them about it and just kind of, I think we sent them a binder of, like, I think it was this big of names of current, former athletes that objected to the policies, and they have been silent. But I think that they're at the point now where they're realizing that this issue is a losing issue. I mean, again, not to get political, that's not the point here, but I think the recent election spoke to that a little bit. So I do think change will come, but they need to keep putting pressure on them. And again, if you see this happening and this is happening at your college, let us know, and we want to help support the female athletes that are going through this. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Hannah Martin. I'm from Belmont Abbey College in Charlotte, North Carolina. Thank you so much for coming. This is something that I am very dedicated to and love, especially how you spoke about it and shared your experience, because watching that happen was it's something that never really should have happened and is crazy to see. What are avenues that you found or different channels that you like to use to project your voice and that you've just found to be useful?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just not being afraid to talk about it. I think that I remember, I went to go work a corporate job for a year where I was expected to be quiet. But interestingly, people at the office would find out that I was on the University of Pennsylvania swim team, and they would kind of grind the gears in their head for a moment, and they'd say, wait a minute, were you on that team with the man? And a lot of them would look to me and they would just not really give an opinion. And I would say, yeah, it was the worst thing ever, and it was so unfair, and it was so disgusting. And they say, oh, wait, you think that it was wrong? And I was like, of course I do. And they would be afraid to share their opinion with me. So I think the biggest advice would be, don't be afraid to share what you believe on something before the other person gives their opinion. Because if they do disagree with you, that's fine. And I think people in this country have come to the point where they want to say the right thing and they don't want to offend the person that they're talking to. But why are we there? Because you can still be friends with someone who has a different opinion. So I think that's the avenue. I think that the most change will be made, because that's happening every day, right? There's every single day you're interacting with people that may or may not disagree with you. So don't be afraid to share your opinion first, and be prepared for someone on the other side to not agree, but also treat them fairly. Don't name call. Don't be hostile if they have an opinion that's not the same. And I think that really, truly, if every person starts doing that in their day-to-day interactions, I think that's where the most change will be made. Yeah.
Hi, Paula. Thank you so much for speaking with us today. My name is Yael, and I go to an extremely far-left college. As a freshman, I lived in the only all-female dorm on campus, but still had to use a bathroom with a male. And recently, I've been figuring out my housing for next semester and requested that my direct roommate be a female, and was told that a note saying a female identifying individual is preferred could be posted on the room. So in cases like this, when I really want to speak out, but I'm still in college and know that a lot can come back to haunt me, especially if it's just me, what would you recommend doing when you're still in college and haven't yet gotten to that point where you really, really can speak out?
Yeah, I'd say do what you can. I mean, obviously don't go do a big interview, and I mean, I know that the news does pick up these types of stories, and it's obviously that's too high profile, it's not for you, but continue to raise the concerns. Go to the university and make it clear that you're not comfortable with someone being male, and point out the problem, saying when someone self-identifies as a woman, it doesn't actually mean that they are one. It doesn't mean that they've had to go through surgery or anything really at all. I mean, a lot of these cases is really just allowing people to self-identify. So make it clear, document it with your university, make sure that people know that. If your parents are willing to help you, make sure they also write a thing and say, I'm not comfortable with my daughter potentially rooming with males. And just make sure that it's on paper, and I think that's the biggest thing to do, and that's a little bit more private because it's not being publicized so much that you're doing that. But definitely try to make it clear that that is your opinion and expose it and make them uncomfortable, make them feel like they have to do something to try to accommodate you and help you. And I think that that is probably the best thing you could do that's not so high profile, but you're still actively working to try to make it clear to them that this is not acceptable.
Okay, I actually have a question. So this will be our last question as well. So with the new Trump administration, what do you think that will do to improve Title IX and like the contentiousness in there? Because I know that the Biden administration has tried to include trans rights within Title IX, allowing trans people into sports.
Yeah, so they've already stated that they're going to obviously rewrite Title IX again to overturn some of these changes that the Biden administration has tried to do. So for those of you that don't know, the Biden administration released the Title IX rewrite past couple of months that has said basically anyone who identifies as a woman is entitled to these female opportunities, meaning athletic and academic scholarships, meaning they could be housed in all women's dorms like we just talked about in the last question, women's bathrooms, women's locker rooms, etc. And also in that, they said that if you do not use someone's preferred pronouns, that you could be charged with sexual harassment by your university. So that's what the previous administration or the current administration right now is trying to do. They've said that they're going to redo that. And of course, having Title IX regulations be rewritten is helpful, but it doesn't necessarily mean that this stuff isn't going to just magically stop happening. So yes, while under Title IX, it won't be required that they do this crazy stuff and allow men into women's bathrooms, dorms, on sports teams, etc., it still could happen. And so that's why it's still up to you guys to keep an eye on these things. And again, when it does happen at your school, if you see it, say something about it, because it is going to be against the new Title IX regulations once they eventually come in and we switch over the administration. But this stuff can still happen because there's still always going to be people that try to break the rules. So just keep your eyes peeled for that. Make sure you raise awareness to it. If you end up going to college and you find out that your roommate is a boy, please tell your parents. Please tell everyone about it. So it's still not, the fight is not over yet, but it is very hopeful for us. And I know that, again, this issue is really finally coming to its conclusions, I think, hopefully. But there's still a little bit of work to be done. And then state level, there's some states that are going to have laws that do allow this. For example, my home state of New York, where I live now, actually just this past, with all of the happiness of people from the election, I just found out that there's this new, we tried to fight against it, but this ballot proposal that was on the ballot everyone voted for that allows you to identify, if anyone identifies as a woman, they're entitled to women's opportunities in law in the New York Constitution. So again, the fight is not over. There's some states that still are going to be having craziness. So keep fighting about this, but there is hope, and I know that we will win on this issue. Yeah.
Okay, so we will have a line for pictures. Thank you so much, Paula. One more round of applause.